I rode into Cold Creek with a deed that wouldn't hold. 3 giant women holding the porch and a black wax coin that said the law belonged to someone else. 30 days. Bells in a whiteout, a calf dragged from ice. We wrote our own law, 4 shares, and now the thaw is bringing Gideon Thorn. The wind came knifing off the high country, blue with cold and mean as a bill collector. Harlan Pike topped the rise and saw the house squatting in the white roofline hard as a jaw. He reined in to let his horse blow. The deed in his inside pocket felt heavier than iron, edges rasping his ribs every time he breathed. His glove had split along the thumb this morning. The skin there was cracked and salty and stung when the wind got at it. A narrow creek shouldered through the flat, rimmed with glassy ice. Cottonwoods stood there like old men, shoulders hunched, listening. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Smoke from the kitchen flue went sidewise, low and bitter. Farther out, a few dark backs moved slow in the snow. Ewes nosing through crust, tough as nails. The porch boards complained under 3 pairs of boots. They were already there, waiting like fence posts you hadn't set, but somehow found on your line. 3 women, big-framed and steady on their feet. The one in the middle had an anvil's calm about her, wide across the shoulders, sleeves shoved to the forearm, scar old as a brand white on one knuckle. To her left stood a rangy woman with black hair braided thick, eyes that measured angles without moving her head. The red-haired one held a ledger flat against her hip, like it was part of her. Harlan slid down and tied off. The leather creaked. Snow squeaked under his boot soles. He kept his hands where folks could see them. "Afternoon," he said. The wind snatched the word and chewed it. The middle one spoke, voice low and square. "Name's Ada Quinn." She tipped her chin toward the others. "Bertie Shaw, Nora Finch." Then back to him. "There's a binding on this place." Harlan felt his jaw hinge. "I've got paper says different." Nora's smile was quick and dry as cedar. "Paper's polite. Winter ain't." She tapped the ledger with 2 fingers. "Out here, paper don't hold people. People hold people." He didn't answer, not right away. The horse blew steam. A hawk went east, all at once, just a fleck in the glare. He took the deed out long enough to feel its weight, to seek us for show, then slid it back. His fingers were stiff. He flexed them slow so nobody read more into the move than warming joints. "The seller was Ephraim Deal," Harlan said. "Property called Cold Creek. Comes with a line of sheep, a small forge, and a sound house." "That's what I was told. You were told parts," Ada said. "No heat in it, just iron. There's work, there's stock, and there's us. We didn't drift in with the last snow. We built what you're looking at." Bertie's gaze cut past him to the creek, then back, like she was always plotting grade and fall. "Wind's turning," she said, mostly to herself. Then to Harlan, "You rode 3 days to get here. No sense freezing while we trade sentences on a porch." Harlan took a step, then paused. A coin was nailed to the porch post, black wax smeared around the head of the nail like tar. The coin had a burr vine scratched across the face, little hooked thorns tight around a stem. Not U.S. mint work, not anything he'd seen in any pay office. It put a burr under his thinking. He nodded at it. "Your mark?" Nora's eyes followed his. The ledger didn't move on her hip. "No, a courtesy from a man who don't trade in courtesies. That means he's taken an interest." "Name?" She let the question hang like frost. The wind answered first, sifting across the yard. "You'll hear it soon enough," she said finally. "Inside first." Harlan looked past them through the open door. Heat pushed out. He could smell iron gone hot and the sweet, fatty ghost of tallow. The kind of kitchen that kept a person alive in February. The kind of room that asked a man to set down his pride with his hat. He kept his pride on his head and stepped up anyway. The board spoke under his weight. The nails were honest and loud about it. Ada took half a step back to give him the width of a man. She did it without yielding 1 inch of ground. "You figure I bought trouble?" he said. Ada's mouth hinted at a grin but didn't finish it. No figuring needed. He glanced once more at the burr vine coin, at the black wax ringed like a frostbitten halo. A mark is a promise where law can't walk. An old survey boss had told him once. He felt the truth of that now, felt it the way he felt his cracked thumb. "Fine," Harlan said. "We'll sit. We'll talk it square. But I didn't ride all this way to be run on a string I never tied." Bertie stood aside and held the door. "Get in then," she said. "Wynne signs the law first, and it's already put its name to the day." Heat rolled out of the kitchen like a slow licking the frost from Harlan's coat. The room wore its work plain. A big black stove shouldered one wall, lids rattling, coffee grumbling low. Along the far doorway, a forge threw green fire where air leaked, and the sing of iron on iron came in short, careful kisses. The kind of tapping a smith used when she meant to true something, not bully it. The place smelled of cinnamon, burnt iron, and tallow candles cooling in pewter molds. It smelled like people who intended to live. Ada sloughed her gloves on a peg and went to bank the forge. Bertie eased past Harlan, with a level and a stick of chalk tucked in her back pocket, like a carpenter who couldn't stop measuring even in her own kitchen. Nora set a ledger on the table and wiped a circle clear on the plank with the side of her hand, then put down a second bundle, oilskin, twine-tied. "Coffee," she said. "It'll fight you, but you look game." Harlan wrapped both hands around the mug. The heat bit his cracked thumb, and he liked it. He drank and let the bitterness set his jaw. He could feel snow thawing on his hat brim, drips ticking to the floor like a lazy clock. Nora slit the twine with a small knife and rolled the oilskin back. Papers, not many, but the kind that had been handled and handled again. A notary seal showed through like a blind fish under ice. "Ephraim Deal's handiwork," she said. "Read it slow." Ada didn't hover. She went to the anvil and tapped a hinge. True, 3 strokes and a breath. 3 strokes and a breath, keeping time for a heart that had its reasons. Bertie leaned her hip against the doorframe where she could watch the wind lick the porch rail and still see Harlan's eyes move. He flattened the top sheet and turned his shoulders to keep the stove glare off the ink. The script was tidy and smug. He read clause by clause, lips wanting to move, but he kept them still. "Partnership for Agricultural Operations and Improvements," he said, mostly to feel how it sounded here. "Profit sharing by fourths. Among named parties." That tracked well enough. The next line made his tongue dry. "Mutual support and companionship for all parties involved." The word sat there like a burr under a saddle. Not dirty, not plain either. It was the kind a man like Ephraim used when he wanted to keep one boot on the porch and one in the parlor. He looked up. Nora's face didn't blink. "Keep on," Ada said from the forge, not unkind. "Obligations of this agreement shall pass to any subsequent purchaser of the property and improvements in perpetuity, unless erased by mutual agreement, consent of all named partners." He let out a breath through his nose. "That's the part I never signed." "No arguing," Nora said. "We know what you didn't sign." Outside, a wolf threw its voice up the draw. Others answered down the creek like a church saying amen under its breath. The wind pushed at the eaves, found a seam, whistled once, and moved on. Harlan set one finger on the notary mark, feeling the dent where the press had bit. The paper was hard with cold and oil. It wanted to be believed. "Law's a fine coat," he said, slow, "but a man still has to shrug into it. Any law still needs a nod." Nora's mouth tilted. Nod and stay. Don't nod and let the wind talk. That's all we said. Birdie shifted enough to bring the Burvine coin into view through the doorway. Black wax ringed around the nail. There's another talker in this, she added. You noticed his card outside? I noticed, Harlan said. You planning to say his name? Nora reached to the oilskin, fished out a small packet of letters tied in ribbon. The top one bled a ring of old black wax. She worried it with her thumb so the seal fell, wobbling to the table. Same Burvine cut shallow. The wax smelled faintly of lamp oil and something bitter. Gideon Thorne, she said. He don't write much. When he does, he likes folks to remember the feel of it. Ada quenched the hinge and steam leapt. He loaned Ephraim on our word, she said. Ephraim ran his feet and left our names to pay. Harlan turned a page and read the rider clauses again, hunting for an out and finding only the penmanship of a man who had trained his hand to lie straight. He wasn't fool enough to say a court would sort it. Courts were 3 days and 2 rivers away, and the rivers were thinking hard about ice. He closed the packet and smoothed the oilskin, then left his hand there a breath, feeling the grit. I bought land, he said. I didn't buy people. Nora held his look. We're not for sale. We're already here. Paper don't hold people. People hold people. We're telling you what holds us. Work, fair splits, plain dealing. Birdie's voice came in from the door, soft but certain. You've been measuring us since you crossed the yard. We've been measuring you since you topped the rise. That was fair. Harlan took another pull of coffee. It had gone colder, which suited him. All right, he said. I've read your trouble. You can read mine. I don't scare easy, and I don't sign crooked. If there's a way to straighten this that we can all nod to, I'll find it. But I won't be dragged by a word Ephraim dressed up to sound decent. Ada set the hinge down like a judge sets a gavel. That's close enough to decent for me, she said. Wind's veering. We'll have it worse by night. A flake drifted through the forge door and died on hot iron with a hiss. Somewhere in the house a clock coughed and remembered how to tick. The black wax seal on the table cooled and dulled. Nora drew the ledger toward her and opened to a clean page. Then we talk terms like neighbors, she said, and we see if the wind will let us keep what's ours. By mid-afternoon the light went tin gray and thin as an old dime. The norther had shouldered down off the high brakes and was busy making everything smaller, house, yard, the very sound of talk. Ada and Birdie pulled tarps tight over the woodpile, knots bit down with that quick, unpretty competence you only learn by freezing once. Nora chalked figures into her ledger with the stub of a pencil, left-handed so the wind wouldn't turn the page on her. Harlan stepped out to the porch and watched the country draw its shoulders up. Ewes huddled in a long comma against the fence, noses puffing. Somewhere up the draw a wolf sang one clear line, and others answered lower on the creek, so soft a man could doubt he heard it. The Burvine coin winked dull on the post. Black wax ringed like a bruise. Hoofbeats came in slow, then stopped the way pride stops, just short of polite. A man on a bay with a sore eye, coat the color of bad tobacco, scarf white as a banker's napkin. He sat neat and easy like he knew he looked good in a window. Two shapes lagged 30 yards back, hats pulled low, horses shagged with frost. The rider flipped something bright into the yard without lowering his reins. It skittered on the crust and bit to a stop. An iron spike, square, clean, new. A smith's child would have called it handsome. Afternoon, he said. His voice had the flat varnish of a man who sells what other men need. Silas Dorn, South Pass Company's stores. Ada came to the porch rail with her shoulders level. Birdie ghosted to the side where she could see both gate and creek. Nora didn't shut the ledger. She just moved it so the wind couldn't read for her. Harlan stayed where he was, one boot heel hooked on the threshold to remind himself he had a house. Silas let his eyes drift over the place, like he was appraising a steer that might dress out lean. They landed on the coin nailed to the post and stayed long enough to mean something. "Thorne's tagged you," he said, casual as weather. "Burvine. He likes folks to know he's thinking on them." "No shortage of thinkers this winter," Nora said. Silas smiled with two teeth and no warmth. He nodded past his shoulder toward the men behind. Levi and Caleb, by the look of them, both built like gateposts that had been set crooked and left. "We won't take the day. Just passing the word that the word is due. 30 days on the ledger Ephraim deal wrote in our books. Feed, iron, lamp oil, 1 cast iron kettle, 2 bolts of muslin, and 12 pounds of coffee he bragged on and never paid for. He said coffee like a priest says sin." Ada's jaw went a shade tighter. "Ephraim's feet ran faster than his honor," she said. "We told you as much when he started skipping steps." "You told my clerk," Silas corrected gently, like he was housebreaking a pup. "Clerks ain't policy. Policy is accounts settled by the thaws first crossing, or I take my pay the easy way, the flock'll do." Bertie's hands were quiet at her sides. "You'd run sheep in a storm and call it payment." "I'd mark them," Silas said. "Then I'd come back with help when the road's good. I'm a patient man." His eyes went again to the coin. "Some men are less so." Harlan picked up the spike from the snow. It burned with cold. He turned it in his palm, feeling the clean arises, the honest forge work. "Pretty nail," he said. "Bought honest," Silas said. "Same as I hope to be paid." Ada's glance touched Harlan's and left the choice with him. He could taste the old habit of a gunfight in the air, not guns themselves, but the quick setting of feet and the way words sharpened to an edge. He set the spike on the porch rail and dusted the snow from his palm. "Name's Harlan Pike," he said. "I bought the place called Cold Creek. I bought it to work it. I ain't defaulting on fair dealt debt, and I ain't carrying another man's drunk promises either. You'll be paid what's just on a schedule a road can stomach." Silas's smile did not change, but it felt thinner. "Schedules are a luxury," he said. "So's seizing stock in a whiteout," Bertie said. "Luxuries for town." The wind came around hard, then cut across the yard and shook Silas's scarf like it meant to pull him off his saddle. He steadied with 2 fingers on the horn, still easy, but his horse stamped the eye-sore hoof and flung cold foam. A door opened behind them and old Gus McKendry shuffled up, Mackinaw patched at both elbows, beard combed by the wind. He smelled faintly of trap wax and wood smoke. "Lot of paper talk for a day, when the wind's got ink of its own," he rasped. "Men recall law, wind recalls debt." He nodded at Silas's spike. "Thing about iron, put it in fire or put it in flesh, you best mean it." Silas tipped his hat to the old man like to a witness called by the other side. 30 days, he said again, mild as milk. He touched his reins and his horse backed a neat step. "If you got a plan to make me happy, I prefer happy. If not," he let the knot hang there, a coat on a nail. Levi, Caleb, the 2 behind him unglued from their saddles and made a slow loop along the fence. Not quite trespass, just enough to let a man see that their boots had treads and their coats had weight. Harlan watched them without moving his head. When they'd circled to Silas again, the merchant gathered them with a look and turned his bay. "Tell Thorne what you like," he added over his shoulder. "He listens to his own counsel." Hoofbeats dwindled. The wind filled their place and took ownership like it always did. Ada let her breath go. "He'll be back," she said. "He will," Harlan agreed. He bent, picked up the spike again, and set it point down in a crack between porch boards, a marker of his own that meant nothing to anyone but felt right in the hand. He went inside, the heat hitting him in the face, and laid the deed next to Ephraim's contract on the table. The black wax puck from Thorne's letter sat there like a dark moon between them. "If we do this," he said, voice even, "we do it proper." They cleared the table the way you clear a claim, push the old rock to one side, and cite a new line. Nora squared the ledger. Harlan drew his pocket pencil and printed neat, the surveyor still living in his fingers. "New paper," he said. "Hours, 4 names, 4 shares. Jobs spelled plain, disputes settled by vote, not volume. Debts faced with dates, not wishes." He met each set of eyes. "And what's private stays private, slow, honest, no one pressed, no one owed for anything they didn't freely give." Ada's brow eased. Bertie's chin dipped once like checking level. Nora's mouth made the kind of smile that means a column finally added up. "Write it so," Nora said. "We'll haul it to South Pass when the road thinks better of us and get Mabel Fenn to put her cold stamp on it." Harlan sketched duty. "I'll mind outside creditors and buy lists. Ada, you're shop and steel. Bertie, water and ground. Nora, books and trade. Profit by fourths unless one of us takes a special run, then we settle fair in the wash." Ada tapped the page with a knuckle scar white as old bone. "Shop and steel suits me, and I don't mind the kind of special run that ends with hinges that don't sag." Bertie pointed through the window with her chin. "If that norther keeps its teeth, we'll need another inch of fall all on the south flume. Ice builds like lies." "Then let's go see it," Harlan said. They bundled up and stepped into the Sting. The light had gone to pewter. Breath showed like truth in a church. Bertie led, carrying a carpenter's level and a sighting staff she'd scratched with notches. At the flume head she set the staff and dropped to one knee, eye behind the bubble. "We're choking here," she said. "Ice has shouldered in. Give me a mattock." Harlan handed it over. Bertie swung compact and mean, chips of blue ice skittering like broken crockery. "Not deep," she said between breaths, "just stubborn." She chopped a channel no wider than a hand. Water lifted its voice and ran like it remembered how. "Take a look," she told Harlan. He set his eye to the glass. The bubble settled dead center. It did a man good, a little round truth floating where you could see it. "That'll move," he said. "Won't if we don't dress the weir," Bertie said, but her tone had contentment salted in. Back at the shop, Shed Ada had a forge, speaking steady, not roaring. A good smith lets the fire think. She drew a bar and set it on the anvil, long shadow of her hammer running up the wall with every fall. "Hinge for the east door," she said. "It whines like an old mule." 3 square blows, a turn, 2 light taps to true the leaf. She quenched and steam lifted with the smell of iron telling a story to water. "Hold," she said to Harlan, handing him the work. With her tongs, he felt the heat through the scale even with his gloves. Ada struck a drift through a knuckle and slotted the pin. The leaves met honest. No daylight where there shouldn't be daylight. "Shop and steel," she repeated, satisfied. "World's kinder when doors mind." In the kitchen, Nora spread a county map under a glass weight. She drew a clean line from Cold Creek to South Pass, marking creeks, bad crossings, and a stand of cottonwoods where snow laid thin. "Candles and raw wool this quarter," she said. "Trade for salt, oats, 2 kegs of nails, and a sack of coffee cheap enough not to insult Silas. We pass Mrs. Appleby's on the way out. Leave 2 dozen tallow tapers. She'll talk for us better than any handbill." Harlan looked over the column. "What keeps us from paying a man who don't deserve it?" he asked. "Nothing but us," Nora said. "So we do it together, loud in the open. If we feed a wolf, it won't be by accident." Old Gus drifted to the doorway, hat white with blown frost, eyes creased friendly. He took in the scene, the ledger, the hinge, the damp mattock. "There you go," he said. "Paper don't hold people. People hold people with work-worn hands." He hooked a thumb toward the creek. "Storm set. If you got lambs dropping, they'll choose tonight for spite." "Don't say it," Bertie muttered, but she was already listening past the wind. They heard it at the same breath. A thin ball too high for full throat. Calf or lamb, new and cold and wrong. Bertie's head snapped toward the south flume. Harlan was moving before anyone spoke. Ada grabbed a coil of rope from a peg and a block with a hook that still dripped quench water. Nora snatched a blanket and a jar of tallow, like a medic reaching for bandage and salve. Out the door and down the yard, snow to mid-calf, breath like little flags. The cry came again, sharper, with water in it. "Flume," Bertie said. "Ice shelf broke." They hit the ditch at a run. A calf, small, spring-early, and slick, had slid off the lip where the ice had undermined, legs punching useless at the glass. The water wasn't deep, but cold will drown quicker than depth. Its eyes rolled white. "Block and tackle on that cottonwood," Ada snapped. "Pike, tie in." Harlan looped rope around his waist and felt the old calm take his hands. Storm, debt, law, everything got small when a life was counting. He slid out on his belly to spread weight, the crust groaning under his ribs. The calf bawled. The ditch answered. Behind him, Ada's hook bit wood, and Bertie fed rope through with clean efficiency. Nora knelt, blanket over her knees, jaw set. "On your say," Bertie called. Harlan reached. The ice croaked. He hooked an arm around wet hide and felt the cold bite through wool to bone. "Now," he said, and the rope came tight. The rope bit and sang. Ada leaned back on the block like a stump that had decided to be iron. Bertie set her boots, both hands on the fall line. "Easy, easy now," she called, voice the size of the ditch, counting the pull so it didn't turn wild. Harlan slid farther out, chest to ice, sleeves soaking hard. The crust talked under him, old boards complaining in a church. He got his arm around the slick chest of the calf, felt the quiver, more cold than fear now. "He's got me," he said, breath in white knots. "Take the slack." Rope came, sure and steady, no jerks. Ada's shoulders rolled small, mean circles. Bertie fed line like thread through a needle. The calf lifted a hand's width, kicked once, and the shelf croaked deep. "Hold," Bertie said. "Don't breathe wrong." The ice answered by cracking across the narrow bridge. Upstream, the little footbridge they used to cross the flume. A seam opened with a tidy sound, then another. Harlan felt it in his ribs before he heard it. "We're losing the plank," he said. "Then we're done talking," Ada growled and gave them one more foot of pull that lived in her back and not her arms. Harlan heaved with it. The calf came up and slid onto his belly, legs bicycling, eyes rolled white. "Blanket," he barked. Nora was already there, knees in the snow, blanket open like a door. She flopped it over the calf and dragged, small and stubborn, while Bertie walked the rope back, paying out steady, so nothing slingshotted. Ada eased the block. The bridge let go with a wet sigh and folded itself into the ditch. They lay a second and listened to the country settle. Harlan's hands didn't feel like hands. They felt like someone else's mistakes. The skin at his cracked thumb bled and salted the wet wool. He rolled the calf onto its chest and thumped its ribs with a flat palm. "Breathe, little fella, breathe." It coughed water and made a soft, offended sound, which was all a man could ask. Nora worked fast, rubbing ears and legs with tallow so the frost wouldn't chew them off. Bertie pinched the skin along its neck and watched it fall back. "He'll hold," she said, and you could hear the flume say so too, under the ice. Ada, squatted by Harlan, took his wrist gentle and turned his hand palm up. Blood had darkened his glove where the rope had burned through a thin place. "That's a fool's glove," she said, but there wasn't any scold in it. She pulled a strip of clean sacking from inside her coat and wrapped him quick, strong, and neat, like lashing a bundle before a long haul. "Does it bite?" "It's talking," he said. The ache ran up his arm and set his teeth humming. He didn't mind. Pain meant he was still invited. For a breath they leaned in close, 4 people, and 1 wet calf, their heat making a small roof under the open sky. No talk, just steam and wind and the slow reset of a heart that had run. The worst of a man can shake loose in cold water. The best sometimes settles after. Old Gus showed at the fence, hat iced white, boots packed up to the ankle. He didn't come down, just lobbed a small tin across. It hit the snow by Ada's boot and rattled. "Pine pitch and bear grease," he called, "for nicks and fool's gloves. Out here we put our backs together first. Words can catch up." After Ada grunted thanks and smeared a fingerful of the salve across Harlan's wrap. It smelled like sap and winter, and it bit in a clean way. They herded the calf into the pen and made it a nest of straw. Birdie watched it stand and set, eyes narrowing, then opened. "He'll sour if we leave him wet," she said, and Nora tossed another armload into the corner without waiting for an answer. On the walk back, Harlan's boot struck something hard, under the skim where the wind had sifted. He nudged with his toe, and a square spike showed its bright corner like a fish turning in shallow water. He crouched and lifted it, new iron, sharp as spite. He looked along the eave line and saw 3 more half buried in a scatter like goat heads. "Nora," he said. She was already bending at the next glint. "Silas's shape," she said, rolling the spike in her palm, "but not his manners." "Levi and Caleb," Birdie said. "They like leaving little favors where a horse will thank them." Harlan kneeled and swept with a glove, the stitches drinking more blood. 2, 5, 9. He made a small pile on the shovel's back. Another seam of them near the storehouse door where a man would plant to lift a sack. "They sowed them all around the place," he said. "Smart as coyotes and twice as lazy." Ada's mouth went to a hard line. "We'll not be lamed on our own yard," she said. String bells, high and low, they worked the light that was left. Ada found a coil of baling wire. Birdie fetched old bean tins and a punch. Harlan stretched wire between porch posts and corner pins, set tins to chime where a body had to pass. Nora walked the fence with a shovel like a slow broom, scooping iron out of snow with the patience you save for long winters and small wrongs. When they were done, the yard wore its new music, thin, honest clinks when the wind touched, a different rattle when anything with intent moved. The flume muttered. The house threw a square of yellow on the drift. Inside they split the night. Birdie took first watch by the south side, where the creek's talk could hide a footfall. Ada took the deep, cold hours that make a person doubt spring's ever been. Nora claimed the kitchen window with the ledger open to S.e.x. Blank page, pencil at the ready like a sentry. Harlan asked for the last. Those hours when men are weakest and dawn is stingy. They ate standing up, cold beans, heel of bread, coffee that fought fair. No one said much. The yard said enough for everyone. When Harlan stepped into his watch, the moon had pulled thin milk over the cloud and set the tin bells whispering like faraway cattle. He stood with the rope burns getting tight and the salve doing its slow work, and let the noises sort themselves into kinds. Wind, water, wood, and whatever might try the line. Behind him the house breathed. In front, the country leaned close to listen back. Toward midnight the wind quit pretending and came full, a white shun that took the yard in both hands. The tin bells along the wire whispered first, then chattered like teeth. Snow lifted off the ground and went sideways, not falling so much as fleeing. Harlan felt the change come through the plank wall, the way a man feels an old break tell weather. He buttoned his coat, eased the kitchen door open, and the lantern on the hook died as if a thumb had pinched its flame. The draft tore the warm right off his cheeks. Nora cupped the glass with both hands, relit from the stove, then set it down and pulled her scarf over her mouth. No talk. The house made the sound of a ship riding against its line. "Barn first," Harlan said, and didn't need to say to who. Ada was already lifting the long brace they kept behind the door. Bertie shouldered a roll of burlap and a can of grease that smelled like pine and tallow, the same medicine old Gus had tossed over the fence. Nora grabbed twine, a sack of oats, and the ledger, out of habit, then thought better and left the book. They leaned into the night, and the night leaned back. The lantern went again at the corner. Ada gave up on light, tucked it under her coat to nurse, and the four of them went by, feel and habit, the way feet recall where the step is in the dark. The big barn door thumped and flared, iron strap hinges complaining. Ada dropped the brace into the floor sockets, sat a cross-piece against the storm side, and wedged it with her shoulder like she was holding a man's temper. "Pin," she said, and Harlan slapped one into her palm. Bertie slid along the U-pens, hand flat to backs, counting without numbers. Here and there a U stood wrong-legged, ice balls forming at the pastern, where wet wool had clabbered. Bertie sat and wrapped legs with strips of burlap soaked in grease, working quick and kind. "Easy, old girl," she said. Same to all of them, voice small to fit the space between storm and animal. Nora threw oats into a mash with the hot water from the kettle they kept on a brick by the stove. Steam climbed and laid down like a quilt. "Warm bellies make warm blood," she said through her scarf to the ewes or to herself. The smell was good, grain, breath, winter. A tin bell clinked twice on the south side, not wind music, but the touch of a wait. Bertie's head came up. "Fence," she breathed. They went out the small door and kept the barn at their backs so they didn't walk themselves crooked. Harlan took the lead on a rope, one hand to the line, one hand to the night. The bells along the yard's run were singing all at once now, but there was a note inside the noise, a hitch and a drag where something with intent had to touch a wire. He moved toward it slow until the sound sat right in front of him. "Hold," Ada said, somewhere at his shoulder, and he could hear her set her boots. The snow tried to crawl down his collar and up his sleeves at once. He crouched, fumbled along the wire with mittened fingers, and found it. Another wire, thinner than a lariat, strung low between two fence posts, ready to snag a knee or trip a man who forgot to be humble. No one in town would think to set it. Countrymen do. "Trip line," he said. "Levi's height," Nora said. "He takes long steps and loves to watch folks fall." Harlan worked a glove off with his teeth, hissed when the cold bit the rope burns, then took the fine wire between bare fingers. Ada had a pair of bolt cutters in her coat. Smiths keep tools where the work lives, and she passed them without looking. One clip, clean. Bertie eased the slack down and wound it around a post so it wouldn't get in some ewes' business come morning. "Spikes next," Ada said. He didn't come empty. Harlan thought of the little seam he'd found by the storehouse in daylight and didn't want to play blind man with iron in a whiteout. "Magnet," he said. Ada's chuckle was short and surprised. "Shop side, bottom shelf." He shouldered through the drift to the forge shed and found the boxy horseshoe magnet where she'd said, black as a chunk of coal with a handle riveted over the crown. The thing had weight to it, a tool that remembered what it was for. He hooked the handle with a rope so he could drag without stooping and worked the yard in ribs, pulling slow. The magnet came up kissing iron, spikes, nails, even a bent buckle from some old harness. He knocked the take into a grain sack and pulled again. Birdie followed with the lantern lit inside her coat like a saint, with a lamp in a catacomb, tipping just enough light to keep a man from stepping wrong. Once the bell on the far corner shrilled, high, sharp, not wind. Ada's head went toward it like a dog's. They moved fast and crosswind to kill their own noise. By the time they reached the fence, the sound was gone, but the story was printed into the drift. A man had come light down from the fence top with both hands on the post, toes angled in, then gone out again on longer strides. The snow had filled the prints into soft thoughts, but Birdie could still read them. Came close enough to count windows, she said. Didn't like the bells. Or the idea of 4 folks waiting to be counted, Nora said. They stood a breath and let the storm write a clean page over the tracks. The bell lifted and fell. The magnet knocked at Harlan's shin to remind him he was holding it. Back to the barn, he said. We proved the doors. Then we let the wind have its say. They made another round, setting wedges where the frame talked, pushing fresh straw where damp threatened to climb, wiping noses with a handful of salt when a ewe got stingy with breath. Ada checked the cross brace again with a palm and a grunt. Door mines, she said, and Harlan believed her. He could feel the mean of the night leaning hard, but he could also feel the way the barn leaned on back with the mind of 4 sets of hands on it. Later, when the worst of the shove had sagged and the white went from a wall to a veil, Harlan took his watch at the south window. The rope burns had gone tight under the salve, throbbing in time with his pulse. Out past the glass, the tin cans made small country talk, all the separate notes he'd learned in one long hour. Brace song, why ear tremble, eve drip flew mutter. He listened for a footfall and heard only his own inside his coat. He thought about the words on Ephraim's paper, that fancy companionship, dressed up in Sunday clothes, and the way it rang false next to the sound of Ada's hammer, the heft of Birdie's mattock, the way Nora's hands had rubbed a calf to life. Paper don't hold people. People hold people. He didn't say it. He didn't need to. The room had learned it. Toward gray, the wind ran out of argument. It didn't quit so much as remember. It had somewhere else to be. The bells kept their whisper, then fell quiet, one after the other, like a line of men taking off hats at a graveside. Harlan unlatched the window and let in a thin bar of air. It smelled clean, and it hurt good in his teeth. They walked the yard at first light. The drifts had crusted on top, giving underfoot with a sound like old pages. Where the magnet had lain, iron made a dark harvest in the grain sack. At the far corner, the night's visitor had left a last print deep enough the wind hadn't eaten it yet. Toes pointed out, going away. Birdie toed the mark and let snow fall back into it. Tracks ran off, she said, as if announcing a verdict. Ada tightened the rope on the corner post, then straightened, breath loud in the crisp. We held, she said. Nora looked from the barn to the house to the fence line strung with bells that now hung still as spoons. We held, she echoed softer. She tucked her scarf down and grinned with the chapped places. Now we make breakfast like we mean it. Then we count what's owed and what's ours. Harlan hefted the grain sack and felt the magnet's work clack inside, coins of another kind. He slung it on his shoulder and followed them toward the kitchen door, the yard giving up the night under his boots. The day would set new terms soon enough. Silas with his papers, Thorne with his quiet. But for the size of this morning, the line had held, and the place had the feel of a house that belonged to its people. Silas came back like a man keeping a calendar. The storm hadn't finished swallowing its last breath when his bay nosed through the yard ruts. Levi and Caleb 2 fence posts behind him. He didn't bother with hellos. He drew a folded packet from inside his coat and set it on the porch rail where ice filmed the grain. "Seizure papers," he said. "Signed proper at South Pass. 30 days was a courtesy. Courtesy's a summer word." Ada's hand fell to the hammer loop at her belt, because that's where her hand lived. But Harlan didn't touch iron. He reached into his coat and laid a ledger beside Silas's packet. Clean page open, pencil squared to the margin. "You'll get paid," he said. 60% on the nail, the rest in wool and candles by dates a road can stomach. You'll sign a stay while we do it." Levi snorted in his scarf. Caleb's eyes found the bell wire and didn't like it. Silas studied the yard like a poker table. Bells, fresh wedge on the barn door, the grain sack of iron in the corner, where Harlan had piled last night's harvest of spikes. His mouth made a thought you couldn't hear. "What secures your promises?" he asked. "Work," Nora said. "Work ain't collateral." "Out here it is," Bertie put in, voice level. "And you know it." Harlan slid the ledger around so Silas could see the columns Nora had set. Feed, nails, salt, oats, coffee cheap enough not to start another fight. Underneath, he'd printed dates that were both hard and honest. "We sat down for South Pass this afternoon," he said. "You don't like my math? Come right and watch us make it." Silas weighed the paper with 2 fingers. His scarf flicked once in the cold. "You can't cross that creek," he said. "Ice took the footbridge." "Then we'll make another way," Ada said, with the faith of a smith who has seen metal change its mind. Silas's smile showed 3 small creases that weren't out of mirth. He put his packet back in his coat and drew a stamp from the same pocket, a little brass-faced thing that smelled of ink and habit. He pressed it onto Harlan's clean page, a round mark that said "Stay requested, pending town approval." "Provisional," he said, almost kindly. "I like men who try." He tucked the stamp away, turned the bay with a touch, and leaned close enough as he passed Harlan to fog the brim of his hat. "Thorn comes at thaw," he murmured, a church whisper. "He don't bring paper." They watched him dwindle into the pail. The wind made up a little tune on the bells and then forgot it. "Road," Harlan said. They loaded the hand sleds with what a human body could afford to drag. Baled, fleece, tallow candles wrapped tight in burlap. A crate with the hinge Ada had finished for Mrs. Appleby's back door as a friend-making favor. Nora double-wrapped the papers in an oilskin, then slid the packet flat under her shirt against her ribs. "Papers stay dry," she said, "or we might as well be telling stories." The creek had frozen wrong, strong where you didn't need it, weak where the crossing had made sense yesterday. Bertie stood with her level and read the banks like a doctor reads a wrist. "There," she said at last, pointing 50 yards upstream, where willows made a lace that caught drifting snow. "We lay brush, pull water over it, let the coal do the blacksmithing." They cut willow and sage, laid a mat across the narrowest run, then packed snow and stamped it with their boot heels. Bertie took a shovel to the upstream edge, shaving a lip so water slopped over the brush and kissed the cold. Ada stood quiet with a pike pole, tasting the new ice with the tip, not trusting it until it said the right thing back. Harlan took the first sled, rope over his chest, hands on the line. The rope burns woke and complained, then fell in step. "Don't stop in the middle," Bertie said. "It's like arguing with a drunk. You give it time, it'll think of something foolish." He didn't stop. The brush hummed, the new ice cracked and set, and the runners squealed across and up onto the far bank like they'd meant to from the start. Ada came next with more weight than Ence and made it, because she wouldn't consider not making it. The last sled groaned under the crate and the candle bundles. Nora walked backward, eyes on Harlan's hands. Halfway across, one runner bit through, just a knuckle, and the whole world seemed to inhale. "Wait to the left," Ada said. calm as a fence line, and Harlan shifted. The sled climbed out, and the breath of the world went on. After the creek came the long pull through cottonwoods, where snow lay thinner. The road woke under them in stutters, then all at once, like a horse that had slept too hard, and remembered its legs. By late gray, they turned down the last rise into South Pass City, boards tight and windows squinting against the cold, the whole town smelling of wood smoke, bacon, and men putting off decisions. Mrs. Appleby's place had light in it and talk leaking out through the cracks. They hauled the sleds to her back stoop because front doors are for folks with empty hands. The kitchen heat hit them like a quilt, sweet with cinnamon and old coffee. Tongues wagged in the common room before they ever crossed the threshold. "Cold Creek Crew," someone said, as if tasting something new. "Big gals and a bookkeeper fella," another voice. "Here they run a man's place with a man to spare?" Laughter, like a saw through green wood. Harlan shook the frost off his hat brim and didn't fish for lines to throw back. He set the crate down gentle on the counter and nodded to Mrs. Appleby. "Hinge for your back door," he said, "courtesy of Ada Quinn, who don't like a door to argue." Mrs. Appleby's face traveled from the crate to Ada's hands and back, and her opinion set itself like aspic. "You'll sit and warm," she said. "You'll leave those candles I pestered you about, and you'll ignore fools as God intended." Silas slid in from the street with the neatness of a coin rolling to a stop. He didn't remove his gloves until he was standing at their elbow. "Provisional becomes pen," he said, and set his stamp on the counter, brass face flashing a little. He marked Nora's ledger with "Stay granted," payment schedule accepted, then tore the stub for himself with the grace of a card trick. "60 now," he said. "The rest when the road says so." Harlan laid coin and goods where they could be counted. Silas counted because the man was built like that. When he was done, he tucked the stub away, pushed his gloves on with 2 small bumps of his fists, and leaned in the smallest fraction toward Harlan's ear. "Thaw comes quick in a year like this," he said, not unkind. "And thorn quicker." He went out into the gray. A few of the room's talkers found other things to look at. Mrs. Appleby set 4 bowls on the counter with the authority of a bailiff. "Eat," she said. "Then go find Mabel Fenn before ink decides it's too cold to move." Nora closed the ledger on the wet stamp like you tuck a child in. Bertie flexed her rope-chafed hands and blew on the raw places. Ada touched the hinge crate and let the edge of a smile out where no one could step on it. Harlan stood a second longer, listening to the room tame itself around them. He didn't care who said what. He cared that the mark on the page had turned from maybe into done, and that the road had held under their feet because they'd made it hold. "Next stop's the clerk," he said. "And after that," Nora added, tapping the oilskin under her shirt, "ink on our names." "After that," Ada said, "we go home." Mabel. Fenn looked up from a nest of blotters like a badger at the lip of its den. She wore a gray shawl and a pencil behind one ear, and the air of a woman who trusted numbers more than men. The potbelly stove in the corner snapped and sighed. "Names," she said, not unkind. Nora laid the oilskin on the counter and unrolled it with a care that made the paper look dear. Nora Finch, Ada Quinn, Bertie Shaw, Harlan Pike. She tapped the top sheet. Cold Creek Partnership. 4 shares, duties spelled, disputes by vote, private matters, private. Mabel drew the paper to her and read, like a teamster reads road, eyes a step ahead of the words. "No mystery clauses," she said at last. "No Ephraim flourishes." The corner of her mouth moved. "I like a thing that is what it says." Ada set the hinge crate down on the floor with a thunk. Bertie stood where she could keep an ear on the street. Harlan took off his hat and didn't fidget. "You want this recorded," Mabel said, "and a certified copy with my seal. You'll have it." She slid open a drawer, brought out her stamp and the little bottle with the world's coldest ink. "Sign along the bottom. Names the way your mothers meant them." They signed. Mabel watched the nibs like a hawk watching a fence line. She dusted each name with a shake of sand, then pressed the brass. The seal bit and left a ring like winter on a window. She made another copy, neat as a hymn. "Fees $2, she said. Harlan paid without counting. "If anybody asks," Mabel added, tucking the original into the record book, "this paper holds because you will. That's the only kind that lasts out here." They didn't say it out loud, but the room seemed to nod. Silas Dorn wasn't in the clerk's office. He had business to sniff in 3 places at once, but they found him at the South Pass Company counter, talking soft to a crate of nails. He listened to Nora read the delivery schedule, then put his tidy signature on the wool and candle contract like a man laying down a card he was happy to show. "Quarterly," he said. "Fair prices. Don't get proud of fair now, it's just the right size." "We'll fit it," Nora said. The town had eyes. You could feel them in your back. At Mrs. Appleby's common room, the talk sagged quiet when the 4 of them stepped in out of the gray. A stove roared. A fiddler scraped at a corner table without any tune to back him. A barfly with a red nose and a person's talent for meanness at the easy parts lifted his glass and grinned at the room, instead of at them. "3 big gals keeping 1 fella?" he said. "Or is it 1 fella keeping 3 big gals?" Ada looked at the hinge crate, then at the man, then at the door she'd soon hang true. Her smile was nothing like Nora's, and nothing like a threat. It was dry as old cedar. "4 folks keeping 1 house," she said. "Takes all 4 to keep it." No one laughed. Mrs. Appleby set down her tray, the way a sheriff sets down a badge. "You'll watch your mouth," she told the barfly, "or I'll find you a smaller room to run it in." The fiddler found a tune. Conversation unknotted itself, and went back to talk a person could live with. Old Gus had drifted in ahead of them, and now occupied the porch like a gargoyle, pipe stem unlit between his teeth because he liked the feel and didn't care for the taste. The snow had quit, and the street was a long gray sigh. He looked at their faces and the copy of the partnership Mabel had folded into a stiff envelope and made a sound in his throat that might have been approval. "Yep," he said. "Home now." He jerked his chin toward the north where the road fell away. "Paper's good. House is better. Get moving while the light thinks kindly of you." A boy in a cap too big for him ran up the steps. Breath hitching, hand out. "For Miss Nora Finch," he said, chest proud of the sentence. On his palm lay an envelope black as a church shoe, sealed with wax that wore the burr vine cut. The smell of lamp oil and something bitter came off it like a memory. Nora didn't open it in the doorway where every eye could see the first flinch. She stepped out into the thin light, cracked the wax with a thumb, and read 2 lines, lips not moving. When she came back, her face was the kind a person wears when a choice has been made early and far away. "Gideon Thorne," she said, sliding the letter flat against her ribs under her coat. "Meeting at the ford when the ice breaks. No paper figures," Silas said from the doorway. A man who had a nose for news. His tone was not unkind. He trusts the river to witness. "We'll bring our own witnesses," Bertie said, "and our work." Ada lifted the hinge crate. Harlan took the sled rope. Mrs. Appleby passed them a sack of something warm by way of Godspeed. Mabel Fenn, done for the day, stood with her shawl pulled tight and gave them a little nod that meant she had done what she could, and the rest was the weather and them. They stepped back into the town's gray breath and set their boots toward the north. The copy with the cold seal rode in Nora's coat, over her steady heart. Behind them, the talk started back up, but it didn't have the same shape it had before. Home, Gus said again, to the street, or to the four of them, or to his pipe. Get on with it. The road home gave back what it had borrowed. Grooves from the sled runners, a print where someone had stumbled and laughed it off, a smear of tallow on a glove that would smell like winter forever. Cold Creek took them in with its square-shouldered quiet. The bells along the wire hung still as spoons. The norther had broken and left the world brittle and honest. They went to work like a habit they trusted. Ada set up saw and auger on the lee side of the barn and framed a lambing shed that could take a March squall square in the teeth. She talked to the boards the way a smith talks to iron, no pleading, just terms. Harlan hauled gravel from the cut on the hill, laying a spine of stone down the lane so wagon wheels wouldn't founder when the thaw turned the place to soup. Bertie crawled the flume with a brush and a chisel, clearing the winter's choke, eyes on the bubble, ear to the water's small truth. Nora climbed and measured and marked joists for a longer candle loft, then dipped tallow late rows of white tapers, taking light like a choir, learning one note at a time. Neighbors came on small errands that weren't small. Eve, from the next draw, brought a dull draw knife that needed a file and stayed to lift a beam. 2 women from the settlement traded a sack of cornmeal for a hinge that didn't lie. Old Gus parked himself on the porch with a coffee that had seen better water and watched the day set itself. He did not supervise. He bore witness, which is different. By dark, the lambing shed had a roof that wouldn't argue with wind. The loft smelled clean and a little holy, and the lane had a grit underfoot that said a man could bring a wagon home at midnight and not curse once. They ate beans and bacon at the kitchen table, sleeves pushed up, cheeks burned by cold, the way a brand burns a hide. After the dishes, the 4 of them sat while the stove ticked itself down. The room had that good tired in it, a quiet that comes when everyone can point at something made and call it done. Harlan wrapped fresh cloth over his rope burns. The salve had brought the red down to a stern pink. Ada's knuckles wore a new scuff where a board had argued and learned manners. Bertie flexed fingers swollen from cold water and said nothing about it. Nora wrote 2 lines in the ledger and shut it with a thumb like she was blessing it. Time to set fences where a fence belongs, Nora said, plain as a fence. We've been busy, not freezing. Now we talk, before the thaw makes fools. No one flinched. It felt like chores. Jealousy's a coyote, Bertie said after a breath. It circles when you're tired and takes what's not penned. I don't mind it visiting, I mind it staying. Ada nodded once. I need plain. You come at me sideways and I hear a hammer when there's none. Harlan found his words like tools he knew where he'd left. I won't be scored on time or touch, he said. If I lean wrong, say so. If I've overstepped, tell. Me with the same voice you use on a hinge, you want to last. Nora looked at each of them, eyes soft and old as a midwife's. We don't keep ledger on hearts, she said. We don't trade favors. We ask, we nod, we don't nod, we don't do. We check each other in the morning like stock and in the evening like weather. We make room on purpose. Bertie let out a breath she'd been holding for a winter and didn't know it. Room made, she said. Ada's hand went palm up on the table, scar white and honest. Harlan set his hand there, rope burns showing but healing. Nora laid hers over both, warm from the stove. Bertie stacked the last, fingers cold and sure. No one called it anything. The house called it what it was. They didn't get holy about it. They slept in the rooms they'd been sleeping in. Work would pull them together and apart as it needed to. In the gray before dawn, when a ewe bawled and a lamb answered late and wet, Harlan and Bertie were the ones who went. Later, when a hinge sagged on the north door, it was Ada and Harlan under it with shoulder and wedge. When the books needed sorting, Nora sat with Harlan over coffee gone to tar, explaining in her dry way how numbers lie when you let them. Mid-morning, a rider came up the lane the way a clock strikes, on time and without opinions. Dark coat, dark horse, hat pulled low against a wind that wasn't much but still liked to be felt. He didn't come near the porch. He reached from the saddle and hooked a small envelope over the gatepost with a bit of wire, then turned and rode back the way he'd come. His horse didn't waste a footfall. Punctual men have punctilious animals. Ada reached the gate first and brought the envelope back between two fingers like a thorn. Black paper, black wax, the burr vine cut into it neat, the river's name written in a hand that didn't practice, it just was. Nora cracked the seal where the last one had cracked. 2 lines, a day that lived between thaw and flood. A place, the ford, where the creek forgot to be polite and spread itself thin, no signature. Didn't need one. "Thorn's clerk," she said. "Not Thorn." "Less noise," Bertie said. "Same weather." Old Gus spat into the snow and missed on purpose. "Man sends his time ahead so he can live on it when he gets there," he said. "Punctual don't mean friendly. Means he expects you to be too." Nora slid the paper flat against her ribs with the other one, near the cold seal that lived there like a small moon. She looked at the 3 faces that had become the same address and nodded. "When the ford bears its stones," she said, "we go." Not before Harlan stood with gravel dust still in his cuffs and watched the sky where the sun was more rumor than fact. The thaw would come. The creek would talk different. The road would change its mind. They'd have to change with it. "Work now," he said. So they worked. The lambing shed took straw and turned life. The candle loft filled with rows as straight as a hymn. The lane held under boot and sled. Late in the day, Nora stood in the doorway with a cup and watched the lot of it, the shed, the flume, the porch with its lazy bells, and let herself smile with the chapped places. "Paper don't hold people, people hold people," she said, not for reminder so much as for record. The eaves ticked. The light went to tin. Somewhere under the ice, a trickle found a new path and made a sound a river makes when it remembers its name. The black envelope on the gatepost had gone cold as a fact, but the house behind it was warm, and that counted more than ink. Late winter laid a quiet hand on the place. The air had that tin taste a man knows from biting a nail, light, thin as bone china. Eaves ticked, slow and regular, a metronome for the day. Out past the lambing shed a white haze lifted, where the sun pried at drifts and the drifts pretended not to notice. The creek talked under its lid, soft gossip, not argument. They moved through chores without hurry. Ada put the new hinge on the pantry door and made it mind. The door swung and stayed where you set it, like a good mule. Bertie checked the flume with her level and her ear and came back with her jaw easy. Nora finished a run of tapers, rows of white small soldiers catching what light there was, and trimmed wicks with a pocket knife so clean it made no sound. Harlan carried a sack of gravel to the low spot by the gate and let it go grain by grain, listening to how it landed, the way a man listens to a story he wants to last. Toward afternoon they drifted to the porch, because the porch is where a body counts, and because coffee tastes more like itself in a little wind. Old Gus had already claimed the step. He held his cup like a sinner holds a hymn book, not because of faith, but because of habit that had gotten him through harder evenings. "Place sits different," he said, which was Gus for a compliment. "Square on its feet." Ada settled on the top step, forearms across her knees, scar white as a chalk line. Bertie wedged her shoulder to a post and watched the yard with a surveyor's piece. Nora tucked one foot under and warmed both hands on her cup, the copy with Mabel's cold seal, a weight you couldn't see, riding against her ribs like a little stove door. Harlan leaned on the rail where the burr vine coin lived, black wax dulled by weather. He touched the coin without meaning to, like a tongue touches a chipped tooth. No one felt pressed to talk. The house breathed. The bells along the wire hung still as spoons. A lamb sneezed in the shed and was offended about it for a while. "Paper don't hold people. People hold people," Gus said, after a time, not to teach it, just to put it down where it belonged. "Written twice today already," Nora said, dry as cedar. "Write it thrice," Gus answered. "Some truths need a fence on both sides." Silence came back and sat with them, this kind that heals instead of accuses. Ada finally turned her head, not much, just enough to meet Harlan's eye. "You regret anything?" she asked, voice level, a smith asking a bar if it's ready to move. Harlan let the question sit until it warmed to hand. He watched a drip fatten at the eave and fall clean as a pledge. "Sure," he said. "Wish we'd met sooner." Ada's mouth found a real smile, the kind with weight. Bertie's chin tipped 1 degree that meant plenty. Nora breathed out like she'd been holding a small winter in her chest and had decided to let it go. They didn't make speeches. Nora passed the coffee pot and Ada poured for Gus without looking at the cup, the way a woman does when she knows where everything lives. Bertie flicked a finger at the wire and set one tin to whisper, just to hear that the world still had small music in it. Harlan took his glove off and scratched the last of the rope burn itch, pink new skin tight and stubborn under the salve. Down by the gate, the black envelope hung quiet, tied with a bit of wire so it wouldn't go wandering. They could see the seal from where they sat. Burr vine, cut neat, lamp oil smell lived inside the paper like a ghost you couldn't wash out. The letter didn't crowd them. It waited, as same as the Ford waited under the ice. "Thaw'll come quick," Gus said, as if he'd heard Harlan think it. "Creek will show its bones." "Men do, too." "We'll go in the stone show," Bertie said. "Not half water, not guesswork." "We'll bring our paper," Nora added, tapping the place over her heart, "and our hands." Ada rolled her shoulders like loosening a fight that hadn't started. "And we'll bring us," she said, which was the whole of it. Cloud light shifted and laid a pale bar across the yard. The lamb in the shed found a teat and set to with the small, greedy sounds that make the cold worth its trouble. A hawk wrote its one-word signature over the cottonwoods and slipped away east. Something far off cracked, ice changing its mind, or the day deciding it was done with being brittle. They stayed until coffee forgot it was hot, and the porch boards took back the heat from their coats. When they rose, they did it the way they did everything now, not in a hurry and not alone. Ada went to put away the brace because tools earn rest same as people. Bertie checked the barn door out of habit. Doors lie if you let them. Nora set the cooled tapers in a crate, 12 and 12, a count a trader can respect. Harlan lifted the grain sack of spikes and nails and carried it to the forge. Iron won't walk itself to the right place. At the threshold he turned back once more. The yard was plain and true, bells quiet, wire straight, gravel sure, lambing shed square. The black envelope on the gatepost looked small against all that honest work. "Home," he said, just to hear it fit. The eaves ticked. The creek under ice cleared its throat and tried a new tune. Winter listened and for the first time in a long time did not argue. When Winter finally listened, the house held and so did we, by work, plain words, and a little borrowed faith. If this tale sat right with you, drop a simple comment. 0 if you felt home on the porch. 1 if you're ready to ride to the Ford. Stick around and subscribe. I've got more snowbit trails, stubborn hearts, and quiet reckonings waiting down the next ridge.